Hi, and welcome to The Hero Spouse. I'm Kenda Ruth, here to answer one of your questions about marriage and a midlife crisis. Today we have Tessa. Tessa's bomb drop was January of 2019. Date of marriage 2001. And I think Tessa is probably playing around with bomb drop because I know that she discovered things more recently, but she's looking back to figure out when some things really started. And it is a little bit more difficult with her situation because she has an at-home NLCer who is a low energy wallower. And he's been at home the entire time. And looking back to the past, we've seen a lot of things that have gone on, but she didn't make some discoveries until recently this year. But 2019 does make sense given the situation that I know. So Tessa says, this is about baiting and boundaries. My husband has been in MLC for 7 years, but always at home. He got out of the fog 2 months ago and told me the tipping point event he started to feel different was the excruciating cancer death of his beloved brother-in-law 7 years ago, in July 2015. But he also has since whispered to me that his parents' horrible deaths from cancer 20 and 30 years ago contributed. Is this positive that he's telling me these things, that he's confiding? I have put effort to make our marriage safe. Recently, we went away for a weekend to tour seaside properties in an area we've long decided to retire, the same area where our brother-in-law passed away. During this trip, he was rude, critical, selfish, many times. Day 1, I didn't respond. Day 2, I pulled back, boundary, removed myself for half a day. He became better, contrite, but was again critical driving home. This away weekend together was too soon. He just wasn't ready. He's in liminality, is he dipping into acceptance? Basically, where is he? He's been cycling, he's been distant, then he seeks me out. He's also loosely clinging to his unrequited 3.5-year limerent emotional affair with a manipulative coworker who is 5,000 miles away, but he also acts guilty and sheepish lately. He's baiting me. Why? Now, what should I do about the baiting? Should I ignore the baiting behaviors or put up boundaries? So why is he baiting you? Because he wants to see how much he can get away with. He is feeling very vulnerable right now. Because first thing he told you about, you said he whispered that his parents' deaths from cancer 20 and 30 years ago contributed to this depression that has resulted in a midlife crisis, this depression that he's feeling now. He has some fears. He lost a brother-in-law that he loved. He lost his parents a long time ago, but he has fears because he's aging. He's at those ages where it's become real to him that these things can happen to me. And first thing, at what point can I push Tessa away? Or if I keep trying to push her away, I'm testing her to see if she doesn't really go. How hard is she going to keep working to stay with me? And so he's going to try, and that's some of the baiting, is he's testing your determination to stand. He's testing what you will put up with, because he wants you to put up with it. If they really didn't want us, we'd be gone. They would be gone, in other words, if they were really that determined. But he's depressed. So he's going to test you to find out how committed you are to him. How committed you are to him when he's difficult, when he's going through the bad stuff. It's that for better or for worse in sickness and in health. How committed are you to those vows that you gave? Now prove it. You said I do. Prove it. That's what the baiting is. That's what the testing is. Now, what should you do about it? Sometimes, yes, you're right. You ignore the bait. And sometimes, yes, you put in boundaries. It depends on what level of a line this baiting or his behaviors crosses. If it crosses a certain line, And you can sit there and say, you know what, that is inappropriate. Sometimes it's just, that was inappropriate. You don't use that kind of language with me, or you don't use that language with, like that kind of language with me in front of the children. And then there are times where you don't give it the energy. And when you do put a boundary up with it, how much energy are you giving it? You state the boundary and you leave it at that. Now, boundaries have consequences, so what are you going to do? Sometimes, instead of making it a full boundary, you just give that wasn't appropriate. But you do have to leave it, because if you go on and on about it, then you give it the energy. If it is strong enough for a boundary, you have to have a consequence, and you have to consider how much energy does it take to apply that consequence if it happens again. Energy meaning I am giving this attention, and they like attention, and if they get attention, that reinforces the behavior. So energy reinforces a behavior in this context. We don't want to do that. You're right, but it's a balance. There are things that you can't ignore, because ignoring them also makes them worse. Well, she didn't do anything about it, so I can keep doing it. I've been given permission. And you have to know the difference. So sometimes rude behavior is you smile. Say, I like how you just smile and you were still there. Smiling and nice. Not being a Stepfordish while they're being rude to you, but they say something rude and it's like, I'm so glad you're home, or I hope you had a nice day, and you walk away and you do what you were doing before, but you're still gracious. We have to do this balancing act. It is so hard. It is so hard for me to, when I talk about these things to people, to explain that it's a balancing act, because we're not trying to be nice little wifey and allow the bad behavior, and it appears that way sometimes. How do I even explain it to you to say, yes, be gracious. No, don't be enabling. No, don't be a doormat. There's a difference between those things. And so you want to know when to set that boundary. You know, my children right now, they are finding swear words, I'm assuming on TV, and using them. And I am at a loss sometimes of when do I say something about it, and when do I not give it the energy. So Peyton today said, I know it came from Jeremiah. She said it specifically to see what I would do. And I think the word was effing, but she said, and it was that effing, and like it might have been a TV show or something. Oh, it was the Magic School Bus, but she called it the effing school bus. We're watching the effing, but she didn't say effing school bus. She said it so that it was really fast, so it was kind of muffled. And I looked at her and said, that's not appropriate. You need a negative coin. She smiled and said, effing school bus again, because, and I gave her a negative coin. And then I just said, okay, you want to say it again, you'll just get a negative. I won't tell you. But she'll pile up negative coins because they earn prizes by getting positives, and they have to have a certain number of more positives than they do negatives. So at the end of the day, she won't get a prize, and it's a tiny little fidget thing or something that she gets, and she has to turn it in at the end of the day. She said it several times. I mean, that little lady piled up like 3 negatives in 2 minutes. They can get 1 negative in a day, probably, maybe 2 if they have a lot of good coins. And they, otherwise, 3 negatives, most of the time, there's no prize. So in about 2 minutes, she piled up 3 negatives. Do I give it the energy? I don't know. Sometimes I'm at a loss when they tell me, Mom, so-and-so said this. My answer is usually, stop telling me what other people are saying. Because I don't want to give it the energy and encourage them to tattle. Unless it's, I tell them, you know, is somebody hitting you? Are they biting you? Are they damaging you? Otherwise, don't tell me about it if I don't ask. Because I don't want to give them energy. It's the same thing with an MLCer. Not that I want to compare them to 6-year-olds. But sometimes they act that way. We just have to figure out. And you don't know. It is subjective when you are giving energy or not. So I want you to think about it that way, because the answer is yes to both questions. Ignore it, yes. Put in boundaries, yes. And you have to figure out which one to do when. Okay. I hope this was helpful. You can do it, Tessa. I'll see everybody in the next question.